The hurricane season is underway as the first hurricane of 2025 forms in the Atlantic, and we're also tracking severe weather that will form across the Midwest later today that could include some damaging winds, hail, and even a few isolated tornadoes. This is Meteorologist AJ Waterman here with StormChance, where we track impactful weather across the United States and in other parts of the world. So we have Hurricane Erin that is working its way across the Atlantic, and it just formed as a hurricane earlier this morning. So at about 11 a.m., it finally got its act together, but now is a Category 1 hurricane. The National Hurricane Center has put out a new forecast, and that hurricane will be tracking off to the west, potentially producing indirect impacts for parts of the Caribbean, and then it'll be working its way off to the north and west, and then eventually off to the north, heading closer to the East Coast by Wednesday. Now, the storm will be maintaining Category 1 strength as it heads through today and then into early Saturday, and then it will boost up to about Category 2 strength by Saturday night, quickly strengthening by Sunday morning to a Category 3 north of Puerto Rico. Once it passes Puerto Rico, it gets up to potentially a Category 4 major hurricane, just one step below a Category 5. It looks like it may be on the weaker side of that Category 4 strength, and then it will push off to the north. By Wednesday, going into Thursday, it'll be quickly moving up the East Coast, off the coast of North Carolina, and then eventually getting closer to the northeast. Here's the latest spaghetti plot forecast, and this is largely from the GFS model here. So that's the American model, and you can see most of the members take the storm pretty far off the East Coast, but we still have a small percentage of those spaghetti plots that get it closer to North Carolina. This storm has stayed on the southern edge of that cone so far. We'll see how it gets redirected as it moves westward, but there is still a concern that there may be some minor impacts across the East Coast. We're not looking at a direct impact, at least the way the models are going. And then as it pushes northward, it should stay well off the coast of New England as well. So the storm will produce some impacts, most likely being some waves and some wind, maybe some outer bands producing some rain. But thankfully, the models have come into a decent agreement, both the American and the European model, which I'll show you later, that have the storm off the coast. As the storm heads closer to the northern part of the Caribbean, so islands such as Puerto Rico, the British Virgin Islands, and others, it will be getting close enough to produce some gustier winds, most likely tropical storm wind gusts, and you'll also have some wave action as well. The storm's only going to be about 160 miles north of the islands, as far as about 200 miles maybe. So that's the outer wall of the storm, which is the strongest part, but it's close enough to produce some minor impacts, especially the stronger wind gusts, and then, of course, the wave action. So as we take a look at this graphic here, I drew out where the wind shear is aloft. Now, the wind shear is winds that basically move around pressure systems and frontal systems, and sometimes these can interfere with the hurricane in terms of its development and longevity. And it does look like there may be some issues as it passes north of the Caribbean, but not enough to slow the system down. That's why the National Hurricane Center thinks once it gets past Puerto Rico, it's really going to strengthen quickly from Category 2 to 3 to 4, as there's really not a lot of wind shear around, and there's plenty of warm water as well. So let's take a look at those water temperatures. As you can see in and around Puerto Rico, this model kind of ignores the other islands, but you get the idea. We have water temperatures still between 85, 86 degrees just north and east of San Juan. That is plenty of fuel for hurricanes to work with. So I have a couple graphics here from the National Hurricane Center as they've highlighted the percent chance of seeing tropical storm force winds and then the arrival of those tropical storm force winds. And as we know with tropical systems, the impacts extend beyond the cone. So even though you're not in the center of that cone or even on the edge of the cone, you can still get tropical storm force winds and especially tropical storm force wind gusts. So even though you may not be getting a wind gust above 40 miles per hour or a sustained wind rather, you can still get a gust or two above 40 miles per hour. That does happen from time to time. So you don't have to be within that zone or the cone to get those impacts from the storm directly. Now we turn our attention to the other graphic here, which is the arrival of those tropical storm force winds. And you can see how the National Hurricane Center has it all the way out to that 5% risk area. So that's where you could potentially see tropical storm force wind gusts by Saturday morning in Puerto Rico, eventually for Haiti and the Dominican by Sunday morning, and then getting up into the Bahamas by Monday morning, Turks and Caicos a little bit earlier than that, and then it will try to make its way closer to the East Coast, but just staying offshore as the impacts so far expected to be low. So let's take a look at the wave action here. I have this forecast out for the north-facing beaches and northeast-facing beaches of parts of the Caribbean here. And you can see those waves potentially as high as 6 to 10 feet in a number of areas, including Puerto Rico, the Dominican, and Turks and Caicos. You're probably going to see 8 to 12-foot waves out of the storm, so about 10-foot waves rolling on in here as the storm just passes off to the north and east. So the good thing is we're not seeing direct impacts, huge waves out there, but we could still have some pretty rough surf here and likely some rip currents. As we move northward, closer to the Bahamas and the east coast of Florida, we'll have those waves upwards of about 5 to 9 feet on the east coast of Florida, so not too bad, but definitely rough surf. And then for the northeast facing beaches of the Bahamas, you're most likely going to see about 8 to 12 foot waves as the storm passes by, and this will be on Tuesday evening, most likely, with the highest surf coming in high tide, so definitely have to keep a close eye on that. And then working our way even farther up the east coast, we're getting to parts of South Carolina and North Carolina, still not quite close to the northeast, but there will be impacts here, about 5 to 9 feet. And then the Outer Banks, you stick out, so you'll be getting in on more wave action. Of course, I have highlighted 8 to 12 foot area, so 8 to 12 foot waves as the storm passes, and this will be on Wednesday afternoon, lasting into Thursday morning. So here's another graphic of the hurricane as it strengthens over the next few days, quickly moving up to about Category 2 strength. This will be on Saturday, and then eventually Category 3 strength sometime on Sunday. So it will make it up there to major hurricane status. And then a lot of the models are pretty uncertain about Category 4 strength, but the National Hurricane Center has the forecast out for Category 4. So don't be surprised if we're talking about a low-end Category 4 here as we push into Monday's forecast. So this thing will be strengthening and then eventually weakening quite a bit as it moves off to the north. So cooler waters, probably a little more wind shear interactions with frontal systems will start to slow the hurricane down and then eventually redirect it out to sea. So here's a model run of the hurricane. This is the American model, or the GFS. You can see it strengthening pretty quickly as it passes Puerto Rico and then moves pretty abruptly off to the north and the west. I don't think the turn will be that extreme as the storm starts to redirect here, but we will most likely see a pretty stiff change in the wind direction of the storm as it passes by. So here's the European model as the storm tracks off to the north and west. You can see it strengthens pretty quickly, similar forecast to the American, but it has a slower move off to the north, so it takes a little bit longer to turn. And that will get it a little closer to the East Coast, but not by much. In fact, the European model has actually caved a bit to the American model in terms of keeping the storm out to sea. At one point, the model had the storm a lot closer to the East Coast, but now that it's developing or gaining a little more information on other things going on in and around the central Atlantic, it's starting to catch on to the fact that the storm is probably going to make that move off to the north and then eventually to the east. So you can see over the next few frames here, the storm does start to move northward just off of North Carolina and then carried out to sea as a frontal system interacts with the storm. So it's always important for us to analyze as much as we can and also historical tracks and models to get you the best information. Before we move on to talking about Midwest severe weather today, I wanted to announce we have a weather app that is coming up in the next couple of months here. So if you are a weather fan and enjoy looking at weather analysis, this is a new style weather app where we'll be not only giving you all the information every other weather app has and then some, but also we have video updates for your local area, local forecasts, and analysis from meteorologists. We're really excited about this product. We're hoping that it really changes things as we move forward in terms of getting better information, more effective information to viewers just like you. Now, let's take a look at the forecast for the Midwest. We do have a cold front working its way across the area later on this evening, and that will be producing potentially some showers and storms and maybe some severe weather across parts of Minnesota, Iowa, and also Wisconsin. These storms will most likely be producing some strong gustier winds, some small to medium-sized hail, and there's also the potential for a brief spin-up tornado. Here's the forecast from the Storm Prediction Center. It's a level 2 out of 5 risk, but still something to be concerned of as we move through the afternoon and evening as storms start to develop. And as I mentioned, this is level 2 out of 5 on the scale, so the impacts should be low, more isolated, but we're expecting at least a few severe storms in this yellow zoned area that could also spread out into the green zoned area, the marginal risk, but that's going to be a lot more isolated to see a severe storm in that area. There's also a chance for a brief spin-up tornado, even though the threats are going to be more hail and wind-based. We could actually see a brief spin-up tornado in this area from Mankato to Minneapolis, all the way up to Rhinelander and potentially even the UP of Michigan. Very isolated if it does happen and not expected to be a strong tornado environment today. So anything that would happen would most likely be on the weaker side, but definitely keep an eye on the warnings as we head through the afternoon. And if you do get a tornado warning, definitely seek shelter. So let's take a look at that forecast for parts of the upper Midwest and plains. You can see showers and storms will work their way across parts of Iowa and Minnesota. They will most likely be isolated, severe, and then as they work into Wisconsin, it's a bit better of an environment for more scattered severe storms, although the impacts should be a bit lower. As we push into tomorrow morning's forecast, Saturday morning, there could be another round of potentially stronger storms and maybe severe weather across Minnesota and into Wisconsin, but it's probably going to be more isolated, but heavy rain is expected. So looking ahead over the next few days as we push into the weekend and then potentially into next week, still tracking Hurricane Erin as it will be strengthening pretty quickly over the next few days and then becoming a major hurricane. So we'll be tracking that pretty closely. And as it nears the East Coast, we'll have another update on what to expect in terms of wave impacts, wind impacts, and where the storm will be heading. More severe storms also possible across the Midwest and the northern plains. It is that time of the year we do get isolated severe weather in that area. And then there's also potentially a second tropical system. The models have kind of hinted at one, but right now it's not set in stone. But we're going to be monitoring that very closely to see if there is potential for something like that over the next few days. So thanks for watching this video. We love giving you updates here, and I'll have more updates as we head through the next several days.